I will give people 30 seconds, then we'll get into it. Thanks, Mark. Okay, conscious of everyone's time, we will crack on. Thank you very much for joining us today. So, as most of you will be aware, ABx Group have launched a capital raising this morning, jointly led by Sequoia Corporate Finance and GBA Capital. On the line, we have ABx Managing Director Mark Cooksey. Mark will go through a presentation in about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll open up for questions. It's a standard webinar format, so please feel free to write them in the chat, and we'll read them all out at the end. Obviously, we're raising up to $4 million today. It's a two-tranche convertible note offer. The first tranche is actually a very small raising of $370,000, and the remainder, tranche 2, is scheduled to settle in February 2025 for $3.63 million. The notes have a fixed conversion, either 4 cent or the lower of a 4-cent price, or a 15% discount to the trailing 15-day VWAP at that point in time. We've been attracted and we've been involved in the ABx story for a considerable amount of time, and very interested in how they're progressing 3 opportunities, being rare earths at their Tasmanian Deep Leads project, aluminium fluoride technology with their Alcor technology, and bauxite operations and development in both Tasmania and Queensland. Without further ado, I'll let Mark take over, and please enjoy the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So just give you that just to look at. So ABx, 250 million shares on issue, been up around 12 cents, been tracking down a bit lately, and the major shareholders are listed there. No institutions at the moment, but we've got some long supportive shareholders in the company. And so I'm gonna this is a longer presentation, which I will only give the selected stuff to. So as Michael mentioned, we've got 3 areas in the business. First one is rare earths. That's about supplying light and heavy rare earths from Tasmania into Western supply chains. Then we've got our fluorine waste recycling project. It's about producing industrial chemicals from aluminium smelter waste, and that's through our 83% owned subsidiary Alcor. And we also have bauxite resources, which we've done some mining in the past and looking to do so from next year. But in this presentation, I'm really just going to cover the rare earths and the fluorine waste recycling. They're the focus. So for rare earths, the 2 key strengths we have, they're real differentiators, are we have the highest proportion of dysprosium and terbium of any clay-hosted resource in Australia. So dysprosium and terbium are the 2 heavy rare earths in the magnets. The highest price, most supply concentration, 99% from China. And second key differentiator is simple processing, which means we're shallow, and we've got this ionic clay, which doesn't need acid. It just needs a salt to extract the rare earths. Very few clay resources are actually ionic. We're one of the very few in Australia, maybe the only one, and there's only a smattering around the world. So that combination of a really good resource in Australia with low-cost processing is a real strength. The other highlights are shown below. I'll just really touch on a few of them just in a limited amount of time. So I'll skip over the rare earth market, which we know is growing. This shows our current tenements and resource. So that's Launceston in the middle of the map. We've got exploration tenements around Launceston. Some of these are older ones from our bauxite work. Some are more recent, deliberately for rare earths. Our resource is currently 89 million tonnes, all located west of Launceston, that sort of red, green and blue area. Grade 844 ppm TREO, but as I said, the key thing is the dysprosium and terbium, which is a very high proportion, and plenty of scope to grow that resource. For example, those tenements on to the southeast of Launceston, we haven't even drilled them yet. So lots of scope to grow the resource. I'm not going to dwell on this. I can answer questions on the cost implications of not having to use acid in processing. So some of the comparisons with our peers. And this is probably worth showing that the timeline. So our history, as I said, we were exploring for bauxite. We have bauxite resources in Tasmania. We've mined bauxite in Tasmania. During 2020, 2021, we deliberately looked for rare earths associated with our bauxite. So reviewed old data, resampled old samples, then started drilling in 2021, expanded the resource, done initial metallurgical work, and now we're really moving more into the commercial side. So, for example, a few months ago, we signed an MOU with Ucore, so a Canadian-based company planning to build a rare earth separation plant in the USA. So they would be a customer for our mixed rare earth carbonate products. So they're looking around the world who can supply them, and you know, they've picked us as the best prospect in Australia, for example. And so what we think I'll skip to the next slide. It says the same thing. We think our bauxite operations are a real strength. So as I said, we have mined bauxite in Tasmania. Where our rare earth resource is, we also have bauxite there. We've got a mine lease application that we expect to be improved early in the new year, and we'll be mining probably in Q2. So it provides a few advantages. One, you know, some cash flow. Also, the bauxite layer is above the rare earth. So mining the bauxite first gets you access to the rare earths. And also just going through the whole regulatory process and the community process with bauxite, again, smooths the pathway to do rare earths afterwards. So we think our pathway to production's pretty good. I've mentioned Ucore already. That's me visiting their demonstration plant in Canada a couple of months ago. And a couple of other things we think is a real strength of our rare earth project is where we are and the infrastructure. So our resource is mainly in a recently harvested commercial hardwood plantation. So that means you know, it's a fairly straight commercial negotiation with the forestry company. In fact, we already have an agreement in place with them for the terms under which we would mine bauxite there. And we could do something similar for rare earths. Overseas rare earth customers love the idea of buying rare earths from Australia with the whole geopolitical aspect. And Tasmania's got a long, proud history in mining, and we've been active in Tasmania for 15 years, so we know the communities and the regulators and the minerals department, etc. And then on infrastructure itself, we're less than 50 kilometres from Launceston, so getting access to labour, engineering, straightforward. Less than 20 kilometres to the main highway, and then less than 100 kilometres to the Bell Bay port, where we've previously exported bauxite, and we would export mixed rare earth carbonate from there as well. And close to Tasmania, good for water, and we've also got good access to energy, and Tasmania's basically more than 90% hydropower. So that's just the same slide, just for you to reinforce the strengths of the ABx Rare Earth project. I'll now go on to fluorine waste recycling, quite a different project, originally spawned from our bauxite work, but it's really become its own independent, very prospective project. I'll do the same thing with it as I just did with the rare earths. So the real key opportunity we have here, the strengths we have, is that our technology, we can produce hydrogen fluoride, which is a major chemical used in lots of further applications. We can produce that at lower cost because we're using a waste from aluminium smelting as the key raw material rather than fluorspar. And that will then enable hydrogen fluoride production in Australia, which we currently import all of it, and with other fluorine chemicals. So, for example, aluminium fluoride is a major fluorine chemical. You need it to run an aluminium smelter. Australia's got a big aluminium smelting industry, but we totally rely on imports for that additive. It's a bit like AdBlue for diesel. We might remember that from 2 or 3 years ago. no one's ever heard of AdBlue, but suddenly if you don't have it, you can't make diesel. And it's a bit like that with aluminium fluoride. If you don't have it, you can't make aluminium metal. And now I'll go through some of the other key points of the project to why we think it's got a really good chance of getting into production. First one is that the fluorine market, I think, I've done a lot of process development, and this is in a sweet spot where there's a strong existing market shown on the left. So you're not trying to, you don't need a new market to be created for this to stack up. But then you also have an opportunity for the market to grow a lot, which is shown on the right. And basically that's because of batteries. So fluorine chemicals are used in a wide variety of batteries. So there's really a strong increasing demand for fluorine. And what that means is the price is going up. The data I've got there up to US $500 a ton for fluorspar. So fluorspar is calcium fluoride, which is mined around the world. I've seen even higher prices as well, and that's manifested itself in government recognition. So fluorspar or fluorine are listed as critical minerals everywhere, basically. Even Australia added it 12 months ago. So we'd like to make more fluorine chemicals, but fluorspar is expensive. What do? Well, we identified that the aluminium smelters, ironically enough, are producing an increasing amount of a fluorine waste, basically to a change in the market dynamics of how many smelters are in operation and how many are being built. And the graph on the right shows that this bath, which is a material produced by a smelter, the amount being produced is going up and up, but the amount being consumed by the industry is flat. And so there's an increasing global surplus, and it's 50% fluorine. It's a valuable material, but it's also hazardous. You can't just simply landfill it. So here, at least in theory, is a source of fluorine. So the obvious thing is, well, can you turn that fluorine source into fluorine chemicals? And so that's what we've done at Alcor. So we take the smelter bath, the waste material, we do a chemical process to produce hydrogen fluoride, HF, and some metal sulfates, which are other industrial chemicals. That hydrogen fluoride can be turned back into aluminium fluoride by an existing process back into the smelters. So a perfect circular economy. But the hydrogen fluoride can be also used for other applications like it is now, and ultimately batteries as well. So it's a really nice combination where it's a loop for an existing process, the smelters, but also has a real growth opportunity for all the increasing demands for fluorine. I'll just skip that one. Where we're up to, we've done laboratory work, batch pilot work, and now we're about to commence, or we're ready to commence a continuous pilot plant, which is a pretty significant bit of engineering, sort of a 20 metre by 20 metre footprint, just over $2 million capex. We're in negotiations and discussions with strategic investors about supporting that project. We hope to finalise them fairly soon. You never know with these things sometimes, but we've certainly got the industry interested in our technology. And then the plan is, well, ultimately, I'm going to go right to the right-hand side to do a large commercial plant in Tasmania. We think there may need to be an interim stage. That's the commercial stage 1. And then all of that is underpinned by a $7.5 million federal government grant, which we had to match have to match 1-to-1 with our own funding. So there's still lots of that funding still available. And long term, once we've done a plant in Tasmania, then we could put other plants around the world in major aluminium producing regions. So taking the waste from smelters within a region and turning it back into hydrogen fluoride or aluminium fluoride, either to serve those smelters themselves or to serve other fluorine markets nearby. So again, just highlighting the strengths of our fluorine recycling projects, and we think we're addressing everything you need to get this into production, and so we're really excited by the opportunity. Okay. Thank you, Michael.
That's an incredibly abridged version of that presentation, Mark. Well done for getting through that in under 15 minutes. As we go, so a few people on the line, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat function and I will read them out to Mark. First one's coming in. So with the $4 million that's seeking to be raised, what will that go towards and what milestones will that enable ABx to achieve?
The majority of it will go to the rare earths just because the Alcor funding's a bit more secure in terms of having the grant, etc. So we view these projects as equally important and equal opportunities, but the need for the rare earths is slightly higher at the moment. So mostly go to rare earths. That will deliver scoping study, which the inputs to that are more metallurgy and more exploration. Well, sorry, it will certainly go towards the scoping study. That's what we're trying to do. We've already done enough exploration to know we have a good prospect. The key next steps in the rare earth project are, what does the project look like? It's focusing on the highest grade zones within our existing resource and working out what is the best way to extract the rare earths and what do the customers need. That's the focus.
Another question. So you touched on the Modern Manufacturing Initiative grant that was received by Alcor. Are there similar opportunities for grants within the rare earth space?
Definitely. In fact, there's been some announced this year for critical minerals. We're actively engaged in those processes. We know there's the departments and the government advise there's new grants being planned for next year. Of course, subject to the election, but absolutely critical minerals is a very important area. In fact, well, certainly to the current government and to the opposition as well.
Another question. So the rare earths assets are in Tasmania. How has land access been? How has local stakeholder community consultation been operating in that area?
Yeah, so historically we've had very good landowner relations. So when we mine bauxite just south of Launceston, firstly very smooth. In our mine lease application for the new bauxite mine going in now, again, we talked to all the landowners, all very supportive. We have had some, as the development application has been advertised, we have had some of the wider community. There is some uncertainty and some questions about the project, but our basically broad experience is the majority are supportive. They know we're a good operator. There is a small element that is nervous about the project. We'll find out. We're engaged. We've done community briefings. I was interviewed last week by the local radio station and an article in the local newspaper. So we think we're doing everything right to get approval for the project.
Wonderful. Obviously, there have been multiple upgrades to the size of the resource in 2024, which leads us to the current number of 89 million tonnes at circa 840 parts per million TREO. What does that equate to in terms of a life of mine? And so you said that's sufficient already. You feel like you don't need to do further drilling to expand the size of the resource. Yeah,
it's the biggest factor really actually is what the customers require. So, but ballpark, that resource is sufficient for 10 or 20 years. So this is like saying, when I say sufficient, what I'm saying is if you look at the minimum case scenarios, well, what would one or two customers require, to be meaningful for them, and what grade do we need, and what metallurgy do we need, and what life do we need, and a realistic life. There's no point planning for a 2-year life, but so looking at a 10 to 20 year life, our current resource size is probably in that ballpark. Now, we do want a bigger resource, so we'll keep drilling. We also would like to find higher grade. So we'll keep drilling, both looking for new areas and within our existing areas. But ballpark, this resource size is of a scale to be a project.
Wonderful. Okay, unless there are any questions, so as I said before this morning, earlier in the presentation, it is a heavily back-ended offer into tranche 2, which we think is actually quite an attractive opportunity given the current time of year. We're anticipating the EGM to approve tranche 2 occurs in early February 2025, and settlement for tranche 2 will occur shortly after that. And I say that says the company well funded to pursue both the Alcor and the rare earths projects moving forward into 2025. If there are no further questions, thank you very much for joining, everyone. There'll be a recording made after this today, which I'll send out later on, and have a good day.